Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Ghost Stories on a Sunday as nature intended. As you can see, we're in the library tonight, and I have perched on my knee is his royal derpiness. He's being a right derp tonight, aren't you, Derpy? You can't help it. Let's get the camera set up properly. Yeah, Sunday Night Ghost Stories again. Where did the week go, eh? So what are we reading? We are still reading the excellent Scottish Ghost, but I get oh my goodness me, we are going to have to find another book to read tonight because I have suddenly realized we are down to the last kind of half a dozen pages. Derpy, we're going to have to get another book. What can we lean on? What have we been reading as the emergency kind of fill-in book? We'll think of something. Anyway, what are we drinking tonight? Well, we've run out of subscription beers, so we're having some Love Lane Blackbird Extra Stout, 6.7%. Goodness me! So it's going to be a one beer tonight, and probably a couple of bumps. What are we reading? Yeah, excellent Scottish Ghosts, which we've almost finished. Shall we crack on, Derps? Oh, we're also having the Western Gold Honey, Fine's bottle. The Western Gold Honey, which is rather nice. So let's crack on, shall we, Derps? Spinning Jenny. A small stream near the pretty town of Ballater in Deeside has been named the Spinning Jenny Burn, after a very persistent and industrious little ghost that has haunted its banks for many a year. A small, bent old woman. Got the beer yawns, and we haven't even had a beer yet. A small, bent old woman, she is seen to work away feverishly at her spinning wheel by the stream, oblivious to any mortal that might lay eyes on her. The ghost is completely harmless and has never been known to interact in any way with living people. Who she is or why she works so hard, no one knows. Should we have a thunderclap? I think we will. Enough of that. I think we will have a quick swig of the old beer tonight. So, the modernisation of a manifestation. There are quite a few stories told of ghostly vehicles that have been witnessed the width and breadth of Scotland, and some have been included elsewhere in this book. None is quite so strange, however, as the story of a ghostly vehicle that changed with the times. The story originates in the Isle of Skye, where it is said that for many years the sound of galloping hooves and the clatter of wooden cartwheels would herald the arrival of a phantom horse-drawn carriage to a house in a remote part of the island. Some time after the invention of the motor car, the occupants of the house realised that they had not heard the coach and horses for some time. Then, one night, they heard another sound. Unmistakably, it was that of a motor car. The house was in an isolated spot and vehicles were few, so when the car's engine seemed to stop, the occupants of the house looked out of the window to see who had come to call on them. There was no one and nothing to be seen. Puzzled and a little disappointed, everybody sat down again. Then, a few seconds later, they heard the car engine start up again. The noise began to fade as if the car was driving away. But no matter how hard the people in the house peered into the darkness, no one could see anything. No, I prefer that thunderclap. I think we might incorporate that into our opening titles. And that way we get to avoid another copyright strike from God knows who. So, right. Coming up towards the end of the book. But I'm going to have to disturb you at some stage and go over to the bookshelf there and grab something else to read. But I'm sure we'll find something. So, motherly love. There is nothing on earth as strong as a loving mother's instinct to protect her children. The following story tells us how that instinct can endure even beyond the grave. The story originates in Rossshire. There was once a crofter and his wife who had 3 children. They had little money, but the children had a secure and happy family life. The mother saw to it that the little ones were always well fed and warmly clothed. The children's needs always came first. Then, one winter, the crofter's wife suddenly fell ill and died. The crofter struggled to keep the family going, but it was hard to manage the land and care for his children all alone. It was not long before he realized that he must find another woman to take the place of his wife and care for his home and family. He embarked upon a courtship with another local woman, and before long, the two were married. It was a classic case of the wicked stepmother. The woman was prepared to enjoy the benefits of married life, but she did not care for the children at all and treated them quite cruelly. Come winter, when the nights were long and cold, the children would lie shivering in their beds, in spite of the fact that there were plenty of spare bedclothes stored in a chest in the cottage. When the children asked for more blankets, their stepmother refused. One morning, however, the children woke to find that they were no longer cold. Their bedclothes felt heavier and they were cocooned in warmth. Someone had put extra blankets on their beds during the night. The children were delighted. Their stepmother must have relented. But the stepmother had had nothing to do with it. When she woke and saw what had happened, she was furious. She took the blankets from the children, stuffed them back into the chest, and secured the lid with a lock. The next morning, she was enraged to find that the children had extra blankets on their beds again. The blanket chest still had its lock intact. How had the children got in? The stepmother threatened and hit the children, but they could not or would not tell her how they had got the blankets from the chest. Night after night, the same thing happened. The children would go to bed with a few meager coverings, but by morning they were always snugly wrapped in soft woolen blankets. In spite of all the stepmother's efforts, she could not get the children to tell her how this happened. She said no more about it, but after a few days had passed, she decided to stay awake through the night and watch. The children went to bed as usual, curled up tightly against the cold. Their stepmother went through the motions of preparing for sleep, but when she lay down in her bed, she kept her eyes wide open. She did not have long to wait. She had been lying in the darkness for less than an hour when she became aware of something moving by the blanket chest. She peered across the room and could just make out the figure of a woman opening the lid of the chest. The woman took out a pile of blankets and carried them over to the bed where the children lay huddled together. With great care not to wake the children, the woman covered them up with the blankets, tucking the edges round their sleeping forms. Then she kissed each child softly on the forehead. As the woman straightened, the stepmother caught a glimpse of her face. It was the children's mother. The stepmother leapt from her bed and made a grab for the woman, but she disappeared into thin air. The stepmother left the house the next day. You'll like this next one, Derp. It's called A Faithful Pet. Faithful, not fickle. I'm going to have to disturb you in a second because we're going to have to get up and get the get another ghost book. So, Sloane's me bar. Oh, is it bump time yet? Not quite yet. A faithful pet. Dogs are widely thought to be sensitive to ghosts. The following story, which comes from the west coast of Scotland, tells of a dog with a particular attachment to a ghost. An elderly crofter was heartbroken when his wife of many years died. His two sons had grown up and now had crofts of their own to manage. The old man found his widowed state particularly lonely and hard to bear. His only company at home was their dog, which his wife had been particularly fond of. The dog pined terribly after the death of its mistress and would not eat for many days afterwards. At one stage, the crofter feared that the dog might die, but after some time, the beast seemed to rally and return to its former boisterous self. The crofter would take the dog onto the hillside every day to give it some exercise. The dog was usually very obedient and stayed close to its master, but one day, some weeks after the death of the crofter's wife, the dog ran off. This was completely out of character. In spite of the crofter's whistles and calls, the dog disappeared. The crofter waited for some time, but eventually returned home. Some time later, the dog returned. This was to set a pattern for the coming weeks. Mostly the dog would stay in sight of the crofter when they went out, but every few days it would take off and disappear for as long as an hour. The old man did not have the energy to run after the dog, but one day he followed at his own pace in the direction the dog had taken. Over the brow of a small hill he came upon an astonishing sight. There was his dog in the distance, in the company of a familiar figure, the crofter's beloved wife. The crofter stood and watched for some moments. Then the figure of his wife faded to nothing. The dog, large as life, came bounding back when the crofter called to it. The two made for home. The crofter happier than he had been for a long time because of what he'd seen. Oh, that's a lovely story. Sloane's me bar. No, not bump time yet. The Black Dog of Tiree. Humans are not the only creatures to return in ghostly form after death. There are plenty of spectral animals to be seen around. Scotland, especially dogs. There are plenty of spectral animals to be seen around Scotland, especially dogs. The hounds that howl by the ruins of Buckholm Tower in the Borders inspire fear in those who hear them. Another phantom dog has been heard crashing against a bedroom door in Ballakin House in Perthshire. Tiree has yet another canine ghost. Tiree is a beautiful island off the west coast of Scotland, blessed with long stretches of silver sand around its shores. On and around one such beach on the northern side of the island, a ghostly dog has been seen and heard several times. The dog is large and black and usually makes itself heard first with a strange, hollow-sounding bark. It will follow people along the beach for quite some distance before it disappears into thin air. And the last one for tonight is a poem, The Weariness of a Ghost. Wae's me, the acorns know yet. Fae fray the tree that's to grow the wood, that's to mek the cradle, that's to rock the bairn, that's to grow a man, that's to lay me. if you have been affected by the terrible accent I've just done there, hatecrimes.com, I think. So, right, Derpy, you are going to have to vacate my lap for a second. He's literally, look, I don't know if you can see this. There he is. He is absolutely claws dug into my knee at the moment. But Derps, we need to go and get another ghost story book. So you are going to have to be disturbed, I'm afraid. Can you get on your bed? Hey, can you get on your bed? Come on. Come on, I need to get up. I need to get up. Come on, up we get. Up we get. Oh. Come on, up we get. Thank you. Oh, right. Let's go and find another book. He says, treading on his microphone. We'll be back very, very shortly. And we're back. And I've decided that we're going to dip into an absolute stone cold classic here, Ghost Stations, which is brilliant. So we are going to have to abbreviate some of the stories because some of them do go on a bit. But when I say abbreviate, I mean we're going to skip some. We're not going to edit them. Oh, goodness me. Western Zoyland, the Battle of Sedgemoor. It's a postcard I must have bought about 20 odd years ago, 21 years ago. Good Lord. Right. What are we up to? 20 minutes. Yeah, I think it's time for a beer and a bump. So he said, sounding a bit West Country. So in the magnificent Rush beer glass, thank you, viewers Kirsten and Steve in the United States. Cheers, me beers. Oh. I think we will have a bump as well. Slange. Oh, got some fan mail. Let's read the fan mail. Bear with. Sorry, folks. I know this is very rude, me answering emails here. Somebody sent me an article that I wrote nearly 20 years ago, and yeah, right, that's it. That's that little bit of admin done. Right. So ghost stations. So where are we up to? I'm just having a quick thumb through some of these stories here. Yeah, I think we'll start in sequence here. We'll probably read some of these before, but we'll read them again. What the hell? So, ghostly music. Having spent the day in Cambridge, Helen Bevan and her friend Valerie Sager were hitchhiking back to the Teachers' Training College at Bedford along the main A45 road towards St Neots without a care in the world. It was June 1952 and it had been a warm, pleasant day. It was very still, and they went along the road chatting and pausing, waiting for something to come along, but not too bothered. They had passed the American War Cemetery and they were engrossed in some gossip when Valerie said, "What's that music?" Helen paused and listened. At first, I didn't hear any music, but then I heard the sound of a distant big band playing String of Pearls. At first, it was hard to tell as it wafted stronger, then gradually fading on the still air, said Helen. It was about 5 p.m., and what puzzled them was where the music was coming from, as they were in quite open countryside and there were no parked cars or lorries or houses which might have had a radio playing. It was hard to tell at first, even the direction of the ghostly music. It was hard to tell at first, even the direction the ghostly music was coming from, but then all at once it seemed to focus and they were both looking over to the spot and noticed some old Nissen huts. It was then they realized they were passing on their left a disused airfield and saw the runways and distant control tower and hangars. It was only 7 years since the war, and deserted airfields were 10 a penny in East Anglia, so they hadn't really taken it in. The airfield in question was Bourne, and during the war it had been an operational bomber station. From its runways, Wellingtons, Stirlings, and Lancasters of numbers 797 and 101 squadrons had taken off from those now derelict runways. Number 97, Straits Settlement Squadron, was a Pathfinder squadron, and they took part in all the major raids, including the disastrous Nuremberg raid, when 95 aircraft were shot down. Other raids were Hamburg, Peenemünde, and Berlin many times. But the most disastrous raid for the Bourne bombers was on the night of the 16th and 17th of December 1943. This was the sixth raid on the German capital within a month, and from a force of 492 dispatched, Bourne sent 21 Lancasters. In addition to the 25 bombers shot down over enemy territory, 29 crashed in the United Kingdom with a loss of 131 lives owing to most airfields being fog-bound. 4 Lancasters from Bourne ran out of fuel and crashed, killing 28 aircrew. Bourne bombers had been in the thick of it and many never returned. The airfield closed in 1948. Helen and Valerie stood spellbound, looking towards the disused airfield. Then, quite suddenly, the music stopped. We then heard men's voices singing and laughing coming from the direction of the empty Nissen huts, said Helen. We could hear them quite plainly. They will never know what it was, for shortly afterwards a car stopped for them, and it was back to dreary old Bedford. 32 years later, Helen recalls, my feelings were a little eerie when realizing there was nowhere the music could be coming from. I half wanted to go and investigate, but we seemed to prefer to just listen and see what happened next. It was then I heard the men's voices. I did not feel scared, nor did my friend. I have only the haziest of memories of what happened after hearing the sounds from the airfield. The memory is so strong it seems to have blotted out the others. Boom, boom, boom. Beer round a bump. What are we up to? 27 minutes. Oh, let's just check my fan mail. Bear with, folks. Bum. Beer and a bump time. Slange. Oh. The Missouri Waltz. Derek Harrison was a determined sales engineer working for a company that sold a boiler cleaning and descaling service, and he was always pleased to visit Lincolnshire, for he enjoyed the countryside. He was fortunate that his job brought him to Lincolnshire twice a year, spring and autumn. During the October visit of 1978, Derek Harrison stayed at the Limes Hotel in Market Raisin. One evening, he decided not to eat at the hotel, but to drive to a restaurant at nearby Curtin in Lindsay. He had completed his work early and decided to take in the countryside. As it happened, it was to be the most bizarre journey of Derek Harrison's career. After a very pleasant meal, Derek set out for Market Raisin, and it was just after 11 p.m. when he drove along the B1398 road, which passes near the old airfield at Hemswell and does, in fact, form the western boundary. The airfield had begun to take on a derelict state after having been vacated by the Royal Air Force the previous year. RAF Hemswell is a very old airfield dating back to the First World War and was one of the many airfields built on the top of the Lincoln Cliff just west of Ermine Street. Excuse me, the beer coughs. That's a new one. It closed in 1919, only to reopen in 1937 in Number 5 Group Bomber Command. At the outbreak of the Second World War, numbers 61 and 144 squadrons were flying twin-engined Hamdens from Hemswell. Numbers 300, 301 and 305 Polish squadrons also operated from Hemswell with Wellington bombers, and they remained until June 1943. The airfield then housed heavy four-engined Lancaster bombers of numbers 150 and 170 squadrons. Between the 11th of November 1944 and April 1945, number 150 Squadron flew 827 operational sorties from Hemswell, and in doing so lost 8 bombers and 40 aircrew. Hemswell was a frontline operational bomber station during the Second World War, and it played a major part in bombing Germany into submission. It remained open after the war and housed many units with a variety of aircraft, which included Spitfires, Hurricanes, Mosquitoes, Avro Lincolns, and Canberra jet bombers. As Derek drove past the old airfield, he found the need to stop the car in order to relieve a call of nature in a convenient hedge. What was seen and heard was no figment of the imagination. Looking across towards the main airfield complex from the roadway, the airfield sloped slightly. Suddenly he heard the sounds of a small dance band. "The tune will always stand out in my mind," said Derek. "It was the Missouri Waltz." At first, Derek thought that the music was coming from the airfield, but it was all in darkness. Could it be coming from a village hall? but there are very few dense areas of habitation around Hemswell. Perhaps it came from further away. After all, sound does travel at night. It appeared to be coming from the airfield. Then, quite suddenly, the music stopped. I was now rooted to the spot and my heart raced a little faster, recalls Derek, who's from Scotland. After a brief pause, he heard the distinct sound of a piston engine aeroplane starting its engines. The run up of the motors was clearly audible. Suddenly, there was a loud bang from the centre of the airfield, followed by a flash of bright lights. Eventually, the sounds of a heavy truck which stopped not far from where I was standing. Eventually, the sounds of a heavy truck which stopped not far from where I was standing. Although I could hear sounds of voices, laughter, even the crunching of feet, there was nothing to actually see. As the voices grew nearer, I strained into the misty darkness, but again could not discern anything. It was all very eerie. With the voices ringing in his ears, Derek decided that enough was enough. Yeah, again. It was all very eerie, and with the voices ringing in his ears, Derek decided that enough was enough and hurried back to the car. Market Raisin was reached in fairly quick time. Normally, he only drinks water or lager beer, but on reaching the hotel, Derek asked for a large scotch, which was drunk very rapidly. Even the young lady who served him remarked, "Are you feeling well? You're as white as a sheet." "Yes, I must be out of sorts," Derek replied, but did not elaborate. For Derek Harrison, it was a long time before the old airfield at Henswell was ventured near to again, even in daylight. Had Derek Harrison heard a ghost squadron preparing for war? The tune that he heard so clearly, the Missouri Waltz, dates back to the First World War era and was played in military messes in both world wars. Is it a sort? Oh, yeah, again. The tune that he had heard so clearly, the Missouri Waltz, dates back to the First World War. God, really fluffed that up. The tune that he heard so clearly, the Missouri Waltz, dates back to the First World War era and was played in military messes in both world wars. It is a sort of till we meet again theme. What are we up to? 34 minutes. We are through the halftime mark. I need to go downstairs because I did buy myself some more wasabi mix, but guess what, folks? I left it downstairs. So we're going to dash downstairs, get the wasabi mix, and then we'll come up and do half time. So I'll see you in a few seconds. Oh, we're back, and we've got the wasabi mix rice snacks from Lidl. Oh my goodness me, I love this stuff. I have friend Faye to blame for this. It's her fault, but so what have we been up to today? A little bit of gardening. Actually, I say a little bit of gardening. What did I do? So 2 lots of sweet corn today. Having had miserable results with my sweet corn this year, I bit the bullet and bought some Fothergill's sweet corn, soaked it overnight, 2 seeds per module, so that hopefully I'll get a good spread of them, and 2 different varieties as well. So they've gone into the seed trays and they're outside, and they've been in the sun all day, so I'll keep an eye on them. What else did I sow today? I did do some Brussels sprouts the other day. They're going to take a while to germinate. I did something else today as well, which I meant to do. Celery. Probably a bit late with the celery, but the weather's been a bit so we'll see what the celery does. But yeah, it's brilliant stuff. Absolutely fabulous. And I've got flowers to sow. So this week, fingers crossed, might be a 2 reg walk midweek with Reg. There's a surprise. Oh, what do you know, folks? We're at half time and already we have a dead soldier. So, and run VT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
Now, have I cancelled my Beer 52 subscription? I just need to look up Beer 52. Oh, your next beer arrives in 11 days. Okay, so I haven't cancelled my subscription, so fine. We'll keep that. What have we got here? Yeah, we'll keep that subscription running then. So we do like it. I wouldn't buy it monthly, but I think bi-monthly is good enough. So let's have some more wasabi mix snacks. So yeah, fingers crossed, might be a 2 reg adventure midweek. I might be meeting up with friend Laura on Thursday. I think I'm due to see friend Anne tomorrow to sort out some stuff for her. So life is good, folks. It genuinely is. So shall we carry on Mit de Ghost Stories, Ghost Station, which is a brilliant book. The Phantom Party at Odstock Maternity Hospital. Returning wearily from the nursery to the ward after the 2 a.m. feed, I envied the younger mothers their agility as they sprang on to their high beds and almost immediately got back to sleep, said Mrs. Russell. Heaving myself up in a most ungraceful fashion, I then lay awake, becoming more and more aware of the singing to a piano that I could hear through my window. It was April 1975, and Mrs. Christine Russell was in Odstock Maternity Hospital, just south of Salisbury. At 36, she was older than many in the maternity hospital and had just moved into the area, having previously lived in Sussex. When Sister came to check their safe return, Mrs. Russell remarked on the lateness of the doctor's party. Sister looked amazed at the statement, and with a sweeping glance at the snoring mothers, she asked, What party? There was no party. Mrs. Russell replied to the effect that she would like her window closed because the hearty singing was keeping her awake. Sister denied hearing any singing and was adamant that there was no doctor's party. To prove her point that she could hear singing, Mrs. Russell got to her knees on the bed and pointed to where the noise was coming from. Outside was pitch black. Both puzzled and agitated, she again said, "Listen, they're singing to a piano over there," and she pointed outside with her finger. Sister stood with her hands clasped and again denied hearing a thing. She pointed out that there was only a store hut to where Mrs. Russell was pointing, and certainly no doctor's party. Christine Russell decided to say no more about it, but for her, that was not to be the end of it, for before she left Odstock Hospital, she twice more heard singing, and always at the same time. Each time she reported the singing, but each time was told there was no party anywhere in the hospital. "I heard it so clearly," says Mrs. Russell. "The men were singing amongst much laughter and jollity, something like this: 'Give me an O, give me a D, give me an S, give me a T, give me an O, give me a C, give me a K,' with various seemingly hilarious comments for each letter and finishing with, 'And what have we got?' followed by more guffaws. As I was new to this area and had no interest in the hospital building other than to get out of it with my gorgeous son as soon as possible, I never inquired about Odstock and hardly mentioned the singing for fear of being thought in need of further treatment. Ages later, someone mentioned in conversation to Mr. Russell, who is ex-RAF, that Odstock Hospital was used by American airmen during the last war. Ages later, someone mentioned in conversation to Mr. Russell, I read that already. There had been many Americans just south of Odstock. Stony Cross and Ibsley had Americans, and they were also at Middle Wallop to the northeast of Odstock. Americans with their P-47 Thunderbolts were at Bistern, the 371st Fighter Group, Wington, 404th Fighter Group, Christchurch, 406th Fighter Group, Beaulieu, the 365th Fighter Group, and at Lymington, the 50th Fighter Group. The 93rd Bomb Wing of the 8th Air Force Flying Liberators were at Holmesley South. The Americans roughed it using mostly tented accommodation. There were many accidents with the P-47 Thunderbolts, with which they flew missions into France to prepare for D-Day and bomber escort duties. Many Thunderbolts crashed on takeoff from their rough wire mesh runways, and many returned badly mauled by the German flak. Many wounded Americans were cared for at Odstock Hospital. Many young Americans died there, miles from home. Had Christine Russell heard their singing from their last place on this earth? Was it the spirits of those young American airmen? Give me an O, give me a D, give me an S. Odds. Oh, Odstock. Odstock Hospital. Trying to figure out what they were trying to spell there. Oh, Odstock Hospital. It's been a long day, folks. I've been up since stupid this morning. There definitely needs to be a 2-beer strategy on this show. or a several bump strategy. Let's have a think about that. The Ghosts of Death Valley. During the early months of 1944, in the campaign to recapture Burma, a desperate struggle was taking place to gain control of the hill sections around the village of Kohima in the Naga Hills in Nagaland near the Burmese border. The Japanese had dug themselves into high ground east of Mount Japwo, which is some 3,000 meters high, and to supply 31st Brigade, hundreds of sorties by Dakota aircraft were flown to the area to supply drop ammunition, food, and other supplies to our hard-pushed troops. These drops were carried out in appalling weather conditions, and inevitably the Royal Air Force suffered losses, with crews that just seemed to be swallowed up by the rich jungle. All right, I'm going to editorialize here. He's written it as the Jap supply lines. Now, I think we'll say the Japanese supply lines were eventually cut, and thousands of their men died through starvation and malnutrition. Others were winkled out of their foxholes to be slaughtered by our own troops. The few that got away made all haste to get back across the Chindwin River into Burma. In January 1947, long after the thunder of cannon and the roar of aircraft had subsided, the Royal Air Force set up special jungle search units to locate the many of hundreds of crashes during the war and to recover, if possible, the bodies of the crews for eventual burial by the War Graves Commission. One of the search team's many missions was to proceed into the Kohima Valley, which runs between the Mount Japwo and the Naga Hill tracks. The valley roughly runs west to east down the Chindwin River. It was standard practice to recruit local guides for these missions, mainly because they knew the best tracks, and also because in many instances local villagers had found aircraft and decently buried the crews, or even in a very few instances had rescued survivors. In this particular mission, it soon became obvious that guides were going to be very hard to come by. According to one headman, the valley was dead. No life of any description walked or flew in the valley, and it was basically taboo to enter. We did manage to procure the services of 3 Naga Hill tribesmen who are made of somewhat sterner stuff than the average plainsman, said Warrant Officer Len Devonshire. And after due preparation, we proceeded into the low foothills that drop down into the valley. After many days, it became obvious the most insensitive of their After many days, it became obvious to the most insensitive of their party of 9 that the usual jungle sounds were growing less each day. The daytime bustle of birds had ceased, and even the humble cricket had been silenced. The deeper they went into the valley, the quieter it became, until it seemed the only noise was the rattle of their equipment and their subdued voices. All around seemed an air of depression and sadness, and though the jungle had long since clothed the scars of war in its green mantle, the ghost of Kohima weighed heavily on the new life and subdued its normal chatter, said Len Devonshire. He continued, "Our team were no softies, men who spent their time digging up, in some instances, their old comrades and transporting skeletons obtain an inherent hardening against ghosties or things that go bump in the night. But in this instance,
We were all most pleased to leave the area when our grisly mission had been completed and returned to our normal, if Spartan world. One airman who was an ex-merchant Navy sailor from Grimsby in Lincolnshire swore that at night the small sacks that we collected the remains in rattled and moved, but only whilst we were in the valley. As we left, they too seemed to go back to their rightful sleep. Superstitious sailors and natives may be, but there was no member of the search team that had any doubts whatever that they had been into Death Valley with its hundreds of lost souls. 37 years later, Flight Lieutenant Len Devonshire, now retired from the Royal Air Force, recalls those months spent in the jungle searching for lost crews. It was a heartbreaking mission, and even to this day, I can still see all those skeletons. In many cases, it was impossible to sort them out, and we had to collect up what we could. Very few natives would enter Death Valley, and the very mention brought fear into their eyes. I think we need a... I think there's some more wasabi mixed up. I don't know about you. Sorry, faffing with my phone again. Oh, we're going to have some more wasabi mix, I think. Cheers, me bed. Definitely needs to be a 2 beer or beer and a half experience, because we do like our subscription beers. Perhaps I'll get us some small cans. I don't know. I'll have a think about it. Right. The Lavenham experience. Over a morning cup of coffee, June Constable and her friend Philippa decided to get away from London and spend a day in East Anglia. It was September 1976 and a bright sunny day. They had decided to see the very interesting old wall town of Lavenham in Suffolk and to have lunch at the noted hostelry there called the Swan. They set out in high spirits, looking forward to a day out from London. They chatted as they drove along, and they were making good time as they passed through Sudbury. They were now nearing Lavenham and turning, as they thought, onto a side road, found instead they were driving up an old runway. Somehow they had managed to get lost and ended up on the old airfield of Lavenham. Lavenham was built during 1943 to 44, and it housed the Americans. The 487th Bomb Group flew B-24s and B-17s from Lavenham, and it was their home during those dark war years. The American bombers attacked both tactical and strategic targets, which included targets in support of D-Day and then into the heart of Nazi Germany, with attacks on Berlin and many other cities. Many young Americans took off from Lavenham, never to return. They spent their last days on Earth at Lavenham, and they made the most of each day in a carefree manner to help relieve the tension. June and Philippa drove along slowly with the car windows open, looking at what was once a busy bomber station. As they drove along, they passed hangars, the control tower, and other old wartime buildings. They stopped the car whilst they decided how to get off the airfield, and for some unknown reason, they sat almost rooted to the spot, as if held by an unknown force. It was just before midday on a lovely, bright, sunny day. I shall always remember saying, "Oh, do hurry, I don't like it here," June Constable recalls. There was a feeling of being held back and laughter, and we were almost like intruders. From being an ordinary happy morning, suddenly I felt catapulted back in time, almost as though I was surrounded by young people, active and alive. But they were not. The laughter seemed resentful in an amused kind of way, as though these young boys' spirits had suddenly been intruded upon by us and were laughing at us, and the fact that we reacted to the situation by feeling this. Also, a feeling of great sadness enveloped the airfield, and the bright day was gone. Let me just read that again. The laughter seemed resentful in an amused kind of way, as though these young boys' spirits had suddenly been intruded upon by us and were laughing at us, and the fact that we reacted to the situation by feeling this. Also, a feeling of great sadness enveloped the airfield, and the bright day was gone. It was a most unexpected and strange event. June and Philippa talked about it over lunch, and it coloured the whole of their day. Being in their late 40s, Mrs. June Constable is not one with a vivid... being in her late 40s, Mrs. June Constable is not one with a vivid imagination. There is still much to see of the old Lavenham airfield, which is just off the A1141 road. Many of the wartime buildings are still standing and hold many mysteries from those hectic wartime days. An eerie atmosphere. June Constable said she would not go there again. She will never forget the Lavenham experience. It just happened out of the blue. She has never spoken of it to many people, for, as she says, it seemed so amazing and I didn't like it one bit. It could hardly be true, but it was. I think we'll do the ghost of... All right, we have gone through the hour mark. What do you reckon, Derp? Do you think we should do and more? I think and more, and then we'll go downstairs to have some supper. So much as I like to stretch it out, the ghost story show that is, Slangsby Bar. Ah, lovely. The ghosts of RAF Waltham. After the war, many airfields were quickly abandoned by the Royal Air Force. One such airfield was RAF Waltham near Grimsby in Lincolnshire. The airfield had opened as a heavy bomber station in November 1941, and the first squadron to arrive was number 142 with Wellington bombers. They moved out and were replaced by number 100 squadron, whose badge was a skull and crossbones. They fly Hawks these days. The squadron played a vital role in the bomber offensive and attacked targets all over Germany The squadron played a vital role in the bomber offensive and attacked targets all over Germany and the occupied countries of Europe. This was the main squadron at RAF Waltham, and when their Lancasters moved out to Elsham Wolds in April 1945, the station closed to flying. The airfield was then used by number 35 maintenance unit for storage, but this was for only a short period. The airfield soon fell into decay, and the hangar close to the south end at Halton-le-Clay was used by E.W. Nickerson and Co. for storing grain and some conveyor machinery. It was also used for vehicle loading, and at the end of the hangar, an anteroom was used for sack storage. Late one night, an employee on night shift was working in the anteroom repairing sacks. Suddenly, the headless body of an airman in full flying gear passed through the hangar wall into the anteroom, directly in front of where the employee sat working. The headless airman paused for a few seconds, then proceeded through the room and out the other side into the hangar. The employee froze for a moment, then, yelling at the top of his voice, ran as fast as he could through the hangar. By this time, his workmates had stopped him. He was in such a state of shock that his hair stood out on end as if he had been electrocuted. An ambulance was summoned, and by the time he arrived at hospital, his hair had turned white, and whilst recovering in hospital, most of his hair fell out. After the employee had blurted out what he had seen, a search was made of the hangar in case a practical joker had been at work, but nothing was found. After hearing about this incident, Brian Stafford from Immingham made inquiries and found that a Lancaster bomber had crashed during the war close to the haunted hangar, and that one of the crew had died in the crash. The unfortunate victim made a full recovery, including regaining his hair, but he never returned to his job. In 1969, Miss Susan Birchall lived at home with her parents in Cheapside Road, Waltham. Cheapside Road follows the perimeter of the old Waltham airfield, and their house, which was only built 2 years previously, was built near some concrete hard standings on which wartime Nissen huts once stood, the position being very close to the main gates of the airfield. One night in late 1969, Miss Birchall awoke to see, in the gloom, what appeared to be somebody standing at the foot of her bed. She switched on the bedside lamp, and she then clearly saw the hazy figure of a young ginger-haired airman in uniform with one sleeve pinned to his shoulder. "He appeared to be looking directly at me," she said. "I was unable to shout or move, and after many seconds the phantom airman moved slowly towards my wardrobe and then disappeared into it." As soon as the phantom airman had gone, Miss Birchall found that she could move, but decided to stay put and screamed for her parents, who came running into the room. After telling them what she had just seen, they looked through the wardrobe, searched the house and garden, but found nothing. She never saw the phantom one-armed airman again, but a short while later, her family She never saw the phantom one-armed airman again, but a short while later, her family sold the house. Legend has it that during the war, the Nissen huts that had stood Legend has it that during the war, the Nissen huts that had once stood on the site were destroyed in an accident, and one airman had been killed. He was an ex-air crew member who had done many operational missions, and he had been declared unfit for flying. and been grounded because of injuries sustained in an attack whilst over the target. He killed himself with a hand grenade. In early 1980, part of the main runway was used for the storage of Volkswagen cars. Oh, the irony. The B-1 hangar stood at the northern end of the airfield. The control tower stood forlorn and derelict on the western side. A T2 hangar and other buildings were still standing. As mentioned, a memorial to the former air crews of number 100 Squadron is sited in a lay-by on the A16 road, which crosses the old number 2 runway. At dusk, a figure of a Phantom Airman in flying kit has been reported near this spot. As recently as 1982, a courting couple were startled by the sudden appearance of the Phantom Airman, who paraded up and down for a few seconds before vanishing into the darkness. I think we've got the beer burps coming up. Ugh. That's not really a beer burp, that's more of a beer hiccup. 1 hour and 10 minutes. Goodness me, Derp. The memorial to former air crews of number 100 Squadron near the A16 road, where a Phantom Airman has been seen many times. There we go. There's the picture. Ba-ba-bum. Just seeing if there's another short one that we can read. No, these are all hidden. Oh no, there is one. We'll do one more, and then we'll go and have some supper. So what are we up to? 22. Goodness me, it's come up to 11:15. That's very late to have supper, but needs must. The unmade telephone call. During the dark days of 1940, Britain was fighting alone. When Holland, Belgium, France, Denmark and Norway were attacked unoccupied, that brought North Wales fighters into the front line. At the beginning of the Second World War, the airfield was equipped with 2 paved runways and was one of the first fighter airfields in the UK to have them. The squadrons at North Weald in 1940 were numbers 56, 111, 151, 25, 249, 46 and 257, the latter being led by squadron leader Bob Tuck. They had been in the thick of it during the Battle of Britain, and North Weald had also been at the receiving end. In August, number 56 Squadron had lost 11 aircraft in 5 days of hard fighting. By the 27th of September 1940, the worst of it was over, but it was still an uphill fight. A fighter squadron was just returning to base from operations over the English Channel. All landed safely except for one Spitfire, which was in a very badly shot-up condition. The crippled Spitfire eventually managed to make it back to the airfield at North Weald. With it being long overdue, the Air Duty Traffic Control Officer had ordered the usual emergency drills and, over the radio telephone, had instructed the pilot emergency landing drills. Read that again. With it being long overdue, the Duty Air Traffic Control Officer had ordered the usual emergency drills and, over the radio telephone, had instructed the pilot to land just where and how he liked. But there had been no reply, so presumably, as was subsequently proved, the Spitfire's radio had been put out of action by enemy bullets. The fighter swung into some sort of approach and, with wheels up, made a belly landing on the grass at the side of the runway. However, the aircraft struck a dip in the ground and turned over. Seconds later, it burst into flames. The alerted crash crews were soon on the scene, and they managed to pull out the pilot with complete disregard for their own lives. The pilot was conscious, but having lost a lot of blood through bullet wounds, was on the point of passing out. He was placed in the ambulance and rushed over to the operations room, as he had insisted on seeing the controller before he was taken to hospital. The wounded fighter pilot was laid gently down on a settee, and after a quick examination, the squadron doctor decided he could be left for a few minutes and went next door to fetch the senior controller, who was debriefing the other pilots. The squadron doctor had only been gone for a few seconds when there came the sound of the squadron doctor had only been gone for a few seconds when there came the sound of heavy footsteps being dragged along the wooden floor, followed by a crash, then a heavy bump. The doctor and the senior controller rushed back into the room, only to find the fighter pilot slumped on the floor next to the desk. The telephone was off the hook and dangled on its cord to the floor. He had died trying to telephone someone. It must have been a very important call. Since that time, many people, including the telephone operators on night duty at RAF North Weald, have sworn they have heard the sound of footsteps being dragged across the floor, followed by a crash, then a heavy bump coming from the operations room at the end of the corridor. And when they went into the room, there was nothing to be seen, but the telephone was always off the hook and dangling on its cord. Ex-Sergeant Bernard Hughes was at North Weald in 1946. The story was still current, even so far that personnel on the camp, especially the RAF, were dead scared to go anywhere near the place, let alone go into it, he said. One night during the latter half of 1949, Flight Lieutenant John Attrill was duty officer, and hearing the story from one night during the latter half of 1949, Flight Lieutenant John Attrill was duty officer, and hearing the story from one of the operators, decided to investigate. All doors and windows were locked and threads were fixed across the doors and across the room itself. They sat down to see if anything happened. At about midnight, there was a slight sound. I raised my finger to my lips for silence, said Flight Lieutenant Attrill, and quietly opened the door. There it was, dragging footsteps, a crash, then a heavy bump. With that, we rushed down the corridor, unlocked the door, and rushed in. Nothing. All was quiet, but the telephone was off the hook and dangled on its cord to the floor. The last call was still not made. And Run VT. I can't remember if we had a. I can't remember if we did a salutation for the bump element. So let's finish the beer off. So cheers, me beers. Not bad. In the magnificent United Federation of Planet shot glass. Again, courtesy of friends Kirsten and Steve in the United States. Hopefully I'll be speaking to Kirsten this Thursday. So looking forward to that. So Slange. Oh, lovely. Right, that's it for tonight. Fingers crossed. We'll see you again for Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra on a Wednesday. Until then, it behoves me to say thank you for watching. Why? Why not? Stay safe, stay out of trouble, and please don't have nightmares. Good night.